Routier and a crew look silly, spreading all their lies while acting so chilly. Every word they say just sounds so untrue. We see right through the games they pursue. It's a nice day for an execution. Time to rise and find our solution. Execution is the only solution. Liars keep lying with no retribution. Justice for Devon and Damon, we cry. We won't stop fighting until they comply. Bloodthirsty supporters still play their part, spinning all their lies straight from the start. No remorse, no shame in that game, but truth will rise and clear every name. It's a nice day for an execution. Time to rise and find our resolution. Execution is the only solution. Liars keep lying with no retribution. Justice for Devon and Damon, we cry. We won't stop fighting until they come cry.
Okay, continuing on with Darlie Routier fact and fiction, separating the truth from the lies in a Darlie Routier trial, written years ago by our friend Mary Moody. I am trying to keep this alive. It's hard to get to sometimes on the internet. Some days you can't get to it at all. I think that the website is going to go down, and I want to be sure that this hard work is available for people to read for years to come. I went through the introduction to Who's Who, the Routier statement, the arrest warrant, author Barb Davis, all the myths. We are in her own words, and we are on statement 2. It was said they found a fiber on the knife in our butcher block, but that was very similar to the screen. These are Darlie's own words. It was said they found a fiber on the knife in our butcher block, a bread knife, that was similar to the screen, but they couldn't tell us if it was definite. Charles Lynch, a trace analyst with the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences, SWIFTS, received a butcher block with 8 knives from the Routier kitchen. He examined each knife individually, but found fiber evidence on only the serrated bread knife. After removing those fibers to a microscope, I want to make sure that people understand he did remove those fibers to a microscope, because we have some dumbass supporter out there saying he only used his eyes. He conducted 10 to 15 test cuts on an identical screen from the Routier's garage. He got the screen from the other window that wasn't staged and used that. Each and every time he ended up with fiberglass rods that were in every way microscopically identical to the one recovered from the bread knife. He also ended up with rubber debris with glass particles embedded and a dark pigmentation, all of which were in every way microscopically identical to the debris recovered from the bread knife. Lynch looked for other possible sources of fiberglass in the house, such as packaging tape, computer circuit boards, and insulation. The only thing he found was some burned fiberglass in the upstairs fireplace, but it was a very different type of fiberglass from the screen. What made his findings so compelling was the combination of fiberglass rods and rubber material on the bread knife. Davis. Mr. Lynch, when you found the fiberglass and the rubber material on that knife blade, and you found the same material in that window screen, did you look at other sources of fiberglass? Lynch. Yes, in looking at other sources of fiberglass, I didn't find the fiberglass in combination with the material rubber dust particles that was the same as the screen. Lynch also testified that at the bottom of that defect, i.e., the vertical cut of the T in the garage window screen, the fibers are denuded, and that some of them end in more extreme fashion than up at the top. So that is consistent with the serrated knife withdrawal from the screen. This is important. He proves that the type of knife, well, his opinion is, the type of knife that was used to cut this screen was a serrated knife. The knife that in question, I believe is knife number 4 out of the block, is a serrated knife. On cross-exam, Mosty employed a multi-pronged approach. First, he tried to raise doubt by emphasizing that the different amount on each material produced by the test cuts. Why was there only one fiberglass rod on the bread knife, but there are 3 or 4 rods when Lynch conducted his tests? Mosty. But the 2 tests, the rubber dust is similar to the test to the knife, but the fiberglass rods are dissimilar from the test to the knife? Lynch. Only in the number found. Mosty. Right. So in that sense, the testing was inconsistent with what was found on the knife. Lynch. Not necessarily. You can't expect to do a test and have exactly the same amount of debris wind up at the examining table. Mosty. So you could draw the conclusion that what you found on the screen was inconsistent with your testing? Lynch. No, it's not inconsistent. It's very consistent. To clarify, Lynch meant that because his test knife went directly from the screen to the examining table, there was less opportunity for any fiberglass rods to fall off. That's why his test cuts resulted in few more rods than what were found in his initial inspection of the bread knife. The rods were all microscopically identical. Only the quality differed. The state's theory was that Darlie used the bread knife to cut the screen and then carried it back to the kitchen. In that scenario, some of the fiberglass would fall off as she moved from one room to another. Mosty then turned his attention to the rubber dust particles found on the bread knife. Mosty. And you couldn't run a test like DNA on that dust? Lynch. There is a test that can be done. I wasn't able to get those things removed to the proper surface in order to do the test. I attempted, but I couldn't do it. Mosty. So there wasn't even enough to run a scientific test to determine whether or not there was a particular type of rubbery material? Lynch. That's correct. The absolute chemical identification of that rubber dust was not accomplished because those particles are too minute. Mosty. Okay. And those molecular structures that you were not able to observe? Lynch. Nobody would be able to. Mosty. I don't fault you for it. Lynch. Well, no. Charles Lynch could not ascertain the exact molecular structure of the rubber dust particles, nor could the defense, for that matter, but he did go beyond a simple microscopic comparison. He used polarized light microscopy to confirm that the particles on the knife, as well as the particles on the test cuts, were all synthetic polymers, and that nylons, polyesters, rayons, and acrylics were excluded. In addition, the pigment of the rubber dust material was consistent with the color of the window screen. Note, the fiberglass rod and rubber debris were found within the serration grooves, which is more consistent with the bread knife actually coming into contact with the screen, rather than the screen debris somehow finding its way into the butcher block. That fiber was caught in the knife. It was hanging in the teeth. How did that knife get anything caught in his teeth, much less a screen fiber? Both the prosecution and the defense questioned Lynch regarding the possibility that the fibers on the bread knife were actually from Charles Hamilton's fingerprint brush. Davis. Fingerprint brushes. Are they also made of fiberglass? Lynch. Yes, they are. Davis. Did you obtain a fiberglass brush from Rowlett? Lynch. Yes, from Officer Hamilton. Davis. All right. Did you compare the fiberglass that made up his fingerprint brush with the fiberglass that you found on the knife blade in the screen also? Lynch. Yes, I did. The fiberglass rods that make up these fingerprint brushes are much bigger than the rods that make up the screen. So they are very different. Conclusion. Darlie is grossly misrepresenting what was found on the bread knife. It wasn't simply a fiber. It was a combination of a fiberglass rod glass particles, and a dark rubbery material unique to the screen. Her claim that it was not definite refers to the fact that Charles Lynch, or any witness testifying about fiber evidence, for that matter, is prohibited from stating that something is a match. Absent witnessing the actual transfer of a fiber to a surface, no fiber examiner in the world can say that fiber A conclusively came from item B. Does that mean the fiber evidence held no value? Of course not. In combination with other circumstantial evidence, it was a powerful corroboration that the bread knife from the Routier butcher block cut that screen. Post-trial. Darlie's writ of habeas corpus stated that defense experts have concluded that the source of the fiber was fingerprint powder used to dust the knives recovered from the Routier's residence. To support their claim, the defense cited two sources: Charles Lynch's trial testimony and his 2002 affidavit attached to the writ. Lynch testified at trial that when he received the butcher block, neither the block or the bread knife, knife 4, had been fingerprinted. The knives on either side of the empty slot that held the butcher knife had been dusted for prints. In his affidavit 5 years later, however, he stated that the knives had been dusted for prints before he received them. Lynch was simply mistaken in his affidavit, probably due to the passage of time. His trial testimony is likely to be much more accurate than an affidavit made 5 years and probably hundreds of cases later. It is unclear when the two knives flanking the empty slot were fingerprinted, but it was not done at the crime scene. Charles Hamilton testified to every single item he dusted for prints, and the knives were not among them. The remaining knives, including the bread knives, were not fingerprinted. They were sent to Lynch in the trace evidence lab on June 8th. After his testing was completed on June the 10th, the butcher block and the knives went back to the Dallas Sheriff's Lab, where Roger Smith dusted them for prints on June the 11th. So the rubber dust material Lynch found on the bread knife could not have possibly been fingerprint powder. But just for argument's sake, let's assume that the bread knife was dusted before Lynch received it. First, Darlie's appellate lawyers would have to prove that the fingerprint powder was consistent with the rubber debris Lynch identified. If they passed that hurdle, they would still have to account for the fiberglass rod, the same fiberglass rod that couldn't have come from a fingerprint brush.